I think it's time. It's time to watch the trans versus conservative women are periods essential to womanhood middle ground. This is gonna be terrible. I'm gonna be for real, dog. This is gonna be awful. I can feel it from a mile away. I'm gonna go into this and I'm not gonna like it. Let's watch.
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said I want to transition into a black person, and I'm redefining what blackness is to fit what I view it as, right? Would you consider that appropriation?
Wow, Jubilee has just become a Twitch panel. Congratulations.
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing apples to oranges because race and gender identity are two separate different things.
Step forward if you agree. The transgender movement is indoctrinating.
Oh God, dude, this is gonna be so toxic. I can already feel it. I can feel the toxicity coming off the screen, dog. It's not good. Oh no. Oh God, every single conservative is gonna walk forward. Watch. Yep, yeah, big surprise.
We are.
You know, I see these rainbow flags in class, and I'm like, wow, you let the queers and homos in the school these days? That's crazy, dog. You're gonna make my kids gay. Let's hear it.
We're seeing, especially on social media, on TikTok, you're seeing a lot of people in this community really just targeting children, and you're seeing drag shows, even in conservative states like Texas, and even just media, movies. Like, it seems like everything seems to be targeted at these kids. You have drag story hour for kids, and it's just really, I think, predatory in a way. And I'm not saying every trans person is doing this, but as a whole, there does seem to be a route that they're taking to get to the kids.
Dog, I just, like, look, I am if you're comfortable with a church telling children that if they don't abide by this specific book, they're gonna burn in hell for eternity, and you're not gonna say that's brainwashing, that's indoctrination, right? That if they fucking touch their pee-pee, they're gonna burn in hell! Like, if you're fine with that, right? And that's something that's gonna be chill with you as a conservative, which I assume it is. I assume you take your child to church. Then you should be okay with queer people saying, hey, if you turn out to be gay, or anybody around you turns out to be gay, that's okay. Which is the general message pushed by the vast majority of queer and LGBTQ plus media that communicates with children. Obviously, there's going to be a bad apple here and a bad apple there, just like there is in the church. There's a lot of bad apples in the church, especially when it comes to, you know, Catholic priests, and I don't want to get into it. Point is, don't let a few bad apples spoil the bunch. Don't take a few instances of some inappropriate interactions, paint your perception about the entirety of queer people and how they interact with children in media, and explaining, queer topics in an age-appropriate manner.
You hear Blue's Clues playing in the next room, and then you hear the Gay Parade song. It's Blue's Clues. You're not expecting to be talking to the children about that. Yeah. It really makes you wonder, are they really coming for the children?
And I think we see in our population now the rate of young children who are identifying as transgender, non-binary is skyrocketing. And I think there's something to be said for people who are truly experiencing gender dysphoria, which we recognize.
By the way, this woman is a host of PragerU's Unapologetic Live, by the way. And by the way, this idea of like coming for the children, this isn't like a new narrative about queer people. I mean, there used to be this like, and I talk about it all the time, but there used to be these like police ads in the 1960s about like, beware the homosexual, and then it's like, homosexuals are pedophiles and they come for your children. If you see a gay, run. It's like the most bizarre propaganda you could possibly imagine on how you portray queer people. By the way, when we talk about like skyrocketing rates of queerness around young people, I mean, this is like something that's cited a lot. I'm not saying something different here when I say, hey, if you look at the rates of left-handedness in the 1920s, it's like 2%, and 30, 40, 50 years later, it's 12%. Is this because everybody was indoctrinated in left-hand ideology, or was it because slowly being left-handed was normalized over time as people let go of certain religious bigotries? Also, Jeepinese, I don't know how to say what your name is. Thank you so much for the tier 1 and the 10 months. I appreciate it. I will be very careful while pronouncing your name because I don't want an accidental slur.
Exists, and those who are experiencing what is now going to be called, or in the future going to be called, this social contagion gender dysphoria, where they're being exposed to it on social media or in school, or mom and dad are having a conversation about it with children, and children are now starting to develop gender.
After intense debate and criticism, PLOS 1 issued a correction that they did not survey transgender or gender diverse youth themselves, but actually surveyed their parents. Rapid onset gender dysphoria is not a formal mental health diagnosis at this time. NBCnews.com. Can I also say that young people, as they grow older, also discover themselves, right? And as they discover themselves, they're going to find out what they're into sexually, what they're into romantically, who they want to be, what kind of careers they want to go into. And it's okay for people to like one thing and then find out, actually, maybe I don't like that thing, I like this other thing. That's the whole point of being a young person, is to figure out your footing in the world. And I don't know why it's described in such a terrifying manner when it comes to the issue of sexuality. Like in everything else, everybody's like, being young, a time for adventure, except when it comes for sex. Then it is a closeted, curtained off idea that we never discuss, ever talk about, and you can't explore until you're married. Like, it's just, it's silly to me. I don't think it's that crazy that young people are discovering themselves in this way when they're young, and that discovering process sometimes comes with bumps in the road before eventually finding out who you are. And I think that's perfectly fine. This is why I don't treat detransitioners like garbage, is because I you know, that growing up process comes with bumps and comes with changes.
Gender confusion.
Or even babies, right? People who are being born, they don't have to put the gender on the birth certificate, and they're saying you can choose whatever you want to be. Like, that's so dangerous. And even lying to them, saying,
wait, why is that dangerous? Like, when I hear that, I'm like, okay. Personally, I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary for me to do the they be whatever. Personally, I think it's fine for me to raise the child how what gender they are, and if they come to me and they're like, actually, I think I'm this, then I was like, okay, and then I'll make the change. But I don't think they bees are necessary, but I also don't think they're dangerous. In what way are they dangerous? What are they gonna do?
saying like, oh, if we put you on hormone blockers at this age, it won't do anything to your puberty. It won't affect.
Wait. They bees and putting you on puberty blockers are two totally separate. Dude, this is gonna be such a tear. Oh, it's been 2 minutes. Oh my God, no, this is gonna be so bad.
You long term, and it's just a straight up lie. And there's like an entire Reddit thread dedicated to people who transitioned, talking about how much they hate their life now because they transitioned as a child and now they amputated off healthy body parts. And
the thing is, when we talk about detransitioners, is yes, there are detransitioners. Yes, their stories are very sad, and I hope they have very happy lives. But detransitioners are the minority. The vast majority of people who transition are happy about their transition, and or at least approve of the fact that it happened, right? A very small minority are those who detransition. And for all the Reddit thread she's going to talk about of people who are, you know, who wish they never transitioned, I can give you a million more of people who wish they had the ability to transition but can't because of either financial or familial circumstances, or sometimes the governments they live under, which will persecute them for being, you know, transgender or questioning their gender identity.
And are miserable.
All right. Can the disagreeer step forward?
The fact that the trans movement has got people shook has me so excited. The trans movement is not indoctrinating our youth. Our youth are understanding who they are at a younger age. And from what I was hearing over here is a lot of what y'all were saying, I wonder would you say it to the parents? Because we need to really look at what the parents of trans youth really go through. Trans youth, instead of them enjoying their life, playing with their friends, they're up in legislation trying to fight for basic rights here. 1 in 5 transgender youth have tried to commit suicide. Why are we trying to police them?
But you're bringing it only to the parents. The question was indoctrination in general. Am I correct? And then,
But they are part of that conversation. Someone said something about drag shows coming to schools or whatnot. The kids enjoyed it. The parents just had a problem with it. But that's their issue. It's only someone dressed in drag reading a story.
Is
that could
drag
have been
not
anybody.
blackface for women?
That dog. What? I'm sorry. I just can't. I just can't. Drag is not blackface for women because drag has never been used to discriminate against women and be like, we're doing drag to reinforce structural oppression against you and to reinforce stereotypes about you so then we can continue your oppression. Blackface was done to mock black people in order to reinforce societal ideas about them as a system to oppress black people, to make them down, to view them as like these are the barbaric folk who can't be part of society, who can't run society, yada yada. That was the point of blackface. Drag does not have that intention whatsoever. It is people bending gender norms. And you can bend gender norms in very many different ways. It can be in tasteful ways, in distasteful ways. It is a bending of gender norms in art. It is not blackface for women. We're 3 minutes in, guys. 3 minutes in.
I see it as a caricature of womanhood.
But inherently
As
sexual as
insulting.
well.
I have to agree with you guys. I do not like the drag queen social hours.
They don't even. She doesn't even know what it is. She doesn't even know what drag queen. There's no drag queen social hours. Drag queen story hour. They do drag queen performances in front of children where they read a book. That's it. They read a book. Okay. The biggest political opposition you could get out of me is neutrality when it comes to drag queen story hour. And when it comes to the idea that drag is inherently sexual, the bending of gender norms in art and in literature or any types of forms of art, whether it's painting, drawing, or performance, dance, singing, is not inherently sexual. All you need to do is bend gender norms. I've had this discussion a million times in a million different debates, and every time I walk away from it, it's the same conclusion. Drag is not inherently sexual, but there are a lot of sexual forms of drag, and sexual forms of drag is what's mostly covered in the media, and so therefore maybe it should. And then, but that's a totally different discussion than whether drag is inherently sexual, which it isn't, because all you need to do is bend gender norms in art for it to be drag.
I personally, as a trans person, didn't ever go to a drag show until I was about 40. I'm not for the sexualization of kids. Why are we not letting kids be kids and bringing sex into their lives so early?
I think it's predatory in general to talk about sex with children.
Yeah.
Straight sex, any kind of sex.
Who's teaching sex to third grade children? I really want to know.
Have you looked at the California curriculum for sex education? You need to.
I know that when I was in preschool, I got my first crush on a boy because to me at the time, he was in kindergarten, he looked like Prince Eric from
Little Mermaid.
Yeah, Little Mermaid. I don't think like fucking him ever crossed my mind when I was 4, but obviously like it would have been good to know that like it's okay like if you have these feelings for someone of the same sex.
We think of youth in general, they're having sex at a lot younger age, whether we like it or not. Let's just keep it 100% real.
You don't think it's because of that?
I
do not think it's because we introduce the sex education and or basic conversations about like some boys like boys, some girls like girls. If you want to talk about why young people are having sex at younger age, like you can talk about like sexualization of media and advertising and movies and like whether parents are like monitoring their children's like internet search history and like social media. You can talk about stuff like that, but sex education in schools and school curriculum being the reason? Nah, dog. And also when we talk about kids having sex at younger and younger ages, like up to what point? Because now I don't want to get into the like biblical discussion or the discussion of like history, but like child brides in this country is not it's something we've outlawed, but it was something that was legal at one point. And like honestly, I think like the discussions we're having in school about sexuality and when we're talking about like how to practice safe sex, when we're talking about older ages and very basic conversations about acceptance at younger ages, is a lot healthier than the shit we were doing historically when it comes to children and sexuality, which in this country has been really messed up. And in most countries has been really messed up, to be quite frank. America's not special when it comes to the sexualization of children.
I think it's because of that. It starts at home with parents teaching their children, because one or two things is going to happen. Either you teach your children or the world is going to teach your kids. That's the reality of it.
They are learning
That is true. That is true. The world will teach your kids if you don't teach your kids.
about it at younger ages from some adult or even their peers who learned about it from adults. That is, in definition, indoctrination. As a mother and seeing what my children are going to have to be introduced to at such a young age, like I didn't even know what a gay person was till I was like 12. And so they're going to be having these really heavy adult conversations at a really young age just because.
Dog, can I be for real? Like, it is not that heavy of a talk or a conversation. Maybe just because, like, I just have had this conversation about young people having these conversations so many times. But, like, it's not that difficult to say, yeah, some boys like boys and some girls like girls. And then, like, that's basically all you need to say, and that's okay. And that's basically it. Like, you don't, like, they're not gonna be like, so what's a hand, what's fisting? I heard about fisting from Jamal in second period. Is that part, if you're gay, do you have to fist? Like, is that like a requirement, or is that optional? Like, that's not gonna happen when we're talking about these very young classes. I think there is a way to have these conversations at an age appropriate manner. Let me give you an example. I spoke in front of a school very recently about the war in Ukraine. The conversations I had with the 6th graders about the war and the seniors were different, because the seniors, I got into more detail about some of the things that I saw. When I was talking to 6th graders, it was more about Ukrainian geography and more general themes about like how to look out for dehumanization and stuff like that. With maybe some of the same stories, but we leave out certain details, or we don't give as much detail. You know what I'm saying? And that's because I could introduce these topics to them in an age appropriate manner. And the same can be done for topics like this.
Because of their exposure, and that is honestly just scary, because I don't want to have those conversations. That's why I will be homeschooling my kids, because I do believe it is my responsibility to protect them and shield them from the outside world, which is targeting children.
The trans community and the trans movement is really shaking the course of what people think gender identity is supposed to be.
So in one sentence, you're saying that you guys are not responsible for the indoctrination that's currently happening with
Absolutely
children.
not.
And in the second sentence, you are saying we are shook by the fact that you are responsible for it.
No, you are shook at the fact that the trans movement has become what it is.
And a movement that influences people all over the world, and particularly children. And we see it in the fact that the number of young people identifying as transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer is skyrocketing, which means that children are being exposed to these ideas, and it's certainly coming from institutions like the media, like Hollywood, like our public institutions and schools. So to say that that is not happening, or to deny that that is the reality, negates the numbers that we're seeing.
What I would say is that the idea that there is a single transgender movement and ideology is disingenuous, and that at its core, being transgender is about separating sex from sex roles and gender roles that are compulsory.
Do you think that children should be able to transition medically?
No.
I think
No.
it just really depends on each individual situation. They should be able to make the best medical decision for them.
I am comfortable sharing bathrooms with the other side.
Yes, I feel comfortable. Safe, that might be a different question, but comfortable, yes, I feel comfortable.
What I think the bathroom issue opens up is an issue of predatory men taking advantage of the opening. That now they could walk into a women's bathroom or a women's locker room, as we've seen happen in instances like here in Los Angeles at We Spa. And they go into a women's space, they expose themselves to the women, and then they say, well, I'm a trans woman and you've opened up this space for me.
But we
Okay, but let's be for real. When that happens, people don't respect that excuse and they go to jail, right? And there has been no statistical evidence that there's been an uptick in rapists being able to rape or sexual assaults being able to sexual assault through transgender people being able to use the bathroom that they want to use. And let's be blunt here. right? If we saw people who look like Blair White having to use a men's bathroom, I would feel much more uncomfortable than if a trans man was using the bathroom, because Blair White would feel more out of place in my bathroom than I feel like a trans man would be in my bathroom. If that, putting it in the bluntest way possible, because, or Buck Angel, could you imagine Buck Angel in a woman's bathroom? If we were to use it by the standards that the conservatives on this panel, not all of them, but a few of them want, Buck Angel, this guy would be in a woman's bathroom. This guy. Really? I don't think that makes much sense. I don't think that makes much sense at all. And not to mention, if you're a rapist, okay, I was about to say, put yourself in the mind of a rapist, but I would rather you guys not. But rapists are not going to be like, I wanted to rape today, but then like the door said I can't enter. I was willing to violate somebody's bodily autonomy and consent, but I'm not willing to violate the consent of a door. Like it's just not going to work. Like, if they're going to rape, they're going to rape you.
Cannot blame trans.
And I know there's a blunt way to put it, but like a door with a sign on it that says no rape or no men isn't going to stop them.
People for that, and
nobody's blaming you.
That's the problem right here. Because again, when you walk into the bathroom, I'm not interested in knowing what you are, what you identify as. I'm trying to use the bathroom and leave out of there. What people have tried to say is that when trans women go into the bathrooms, they're being predatory, and that is not the case. That is something we do not blame on trans women. Although you were not saying that, when we talk about predatory behavior and when we talk about like the predatory cases, none of them have been trans women. So I just want to make sure. I know she's not strictly doing that, but because she said that, I think it's very important that I bring that out on the table and discuss that.
We have to have the conversation, and I'll open up the question. We know that if this legislation happens, if we move forward with this move, there are going to be men who take advantage of it. Now, I want to ask you,
here's my question. Would they have gone out and done this types of activities anyway? And my answer to that would be yes. Because if these are sexual assaulters and rapists and like pedophiles or whatever, they're not going to be stopped by a door. I just refuse to think that the same people who are telling me that gun-free zones don't work, but totally bathroom doors stop rapists, don't worry about it. I refuse to believe that logic lines up.
Your comfort as far as going to the bathroom more important than the female women that will be victimized by this?
Who said female women will be victimized by this?
They will, and they have.
No, you're only assuming. But
my God, man, the bathroom door has been stopped. It's impossible for rapists to pass through. It's just impossible. This legislation will open up a new route of attack for pedophiles and rapists. They're pedophiles and rapists. Right? We should not change all of our lifestyles and what makes us comfortable to just try to like add a door barrier that opens and closes to stop them. Like I don't see it.
But the reality of it is, again, when people are going into the restroom, when people are only going into the restroom, they're only focused on doing one or two things, and that's using the restroom.
Yeah.
But you didn't answer the question. Is your comfort more important than the female people who could be victimized by this?
Okay, so let me help her answer the question. Which one do you think I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me in? It wasn't the women's restroom. The issue that you're bringing up, first of all, is already violating a whole bunch of laws. Okay, if somebody's exposing themselves in a bathroom, that's a whole different environment rather than just letting trans people in. In California, it's right now 100% legal for trans people to go use the bathroom of their choice. So I don't know what law you're talking about.
You're asking this question as if I...
Damn! Gina came out of left field with a clothesline. Damn. Okay, I didn't even know about that. Damn. Okay, look at that.
Would not stand up for cis women that were in the restroom, and that's not the case. Nice dodge there. But the reality of it is, one thing I'm noticing is we're reducing a lot of these particular conversations to genitalia. And it's not about genitalia, it's about safety.
Yeah, her concern is the possibility of predation, and that's still a probability. It doesn't matter if trans people are using the restroom or not. Sure. But what you're concerned about is that you're possibly that people feel more emboldened to put on women's clothes and go into the bathroom. But they're still violating the law all over the place if that's the purpose that they're going in for.
Yeah, so I didn't step forward because, and I know in today's age this is going to sound very radical, and but I don't agree with the whole transgender ideology, and so for me it's encouraging something that is based in what I feel is delusion, and so I don't think that we should be encouraging that by allowing men into women's restrooms.
I think that if that's the case, that to some extent all gender is delusion. If we're looking at historically anywhere from, midwives after the enclosure of the commons in the 1400s, having their whole trade affected, or Brewsters having their trade affected, and now we don't think of women as, Brewsters, or that creating beer is a womanly thing. These all came from social conditions. These all came, a lot of...
Dude, I don't know why. She looks like she's seething. I don't know if she's seething, but like that face just rages anger to me. I don't know if she's seething or not, but it just looks like she's seething. I don't know why.
Gender, regardless of biological sex, it didn't naturally flow out of our genitals, and it was we're like, this is how my genitals are, so this is how my gender is going to be. That didn't happen. That's not life. A lot of people who are either transgender or who are LGBT in general, all my friends were girls. At first, I just remember there were a lot of things where I would kind of come up against people telling me that that's wrong, that whether it's something I like, something I want to do. It wasn't until kindergarten that someone told me that I'm a boy, and I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable going to any bathroom in this world, in the current society we live in. And to make trans women the whipping girls of that, I think that's disingenuous, but I do think that we need a systemic change to make ourselves safer. I don't really know anyone who doesn't feel a little bit uncomfortable going to the bathroom.
And trans people are not a delusion. Let's make it very clear. We're here. We've been here for ages. We've been here since the beginning of time. We're in your history books. And I think it's very disingenuous to say that a whole identity is a delusion.
I believe that you feel like women. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is an objective truth, and I don't believe in his truth, her truth, their truth, my truth. There is truth, and...
Who defined that truth?
And it's already defined, and as a Christian, I believe God is the one who set truth.
But who defined that?
Is the truth.
Can you tell me who defined that?
God.
Living in the Bible Belt with religion taking center stage, it's hard for a lot of trans and non-binary folks like myself to really...
God determined that's your bathroom. It is basically what the argument became. Okay, got you.
...be able to express who they are. I had to really take on my gender dysphoria.
Okay, can I just say, right? If you were looking at this as from an alien race's perspective, and again, I have an immense amount of respect for people of faith. But if you were like an alien race, you just had somebody say, you're delusional for believing you're a woman. Why? An invisible man in the sky told me you're delusional. Just saying, from an outside perspective, as a Christian, you do sound like when you say that, it doesn't come off the best to people who are LGBTQ, because they feel like you're like, haha, look at all these losers and delusioned people. Look, they're just delusional. And then while you're coming at it from a perspective that a lot of other people who are not of faith, who don't believe the same things you do, would think you look pretty delusional.
for you in private. I couldn't talk to my mom about it. I couldn't talk to my dad, my siblings, because ultimately I felt like it wasn't going to lead to anything because there wasn't a lot of education in the cis community like there is in the trans and non-binary community. We're talking about a book that was written by a man with his own bias.
Who created chromosomes?
Yeah, I'm personally not religious and I believe in science.
When we talk about chromosomes,
Somebody in chat said, Makuzi just said, please don't do the invisible man in the sky memes. Let me be clear, okay? If somebody says in this, like, you're delusional and you can't use the bathroom because God doesn't like it. Like, if you say that, it should be called out. It should be called out that you can't call other people out delusional when you're engaging in behavior that many people would also call delusional like that. It should be called out. Not to say, haha, your religion's stupid and bad, but to say that like, you know, the mirror can be turned around for a second. You know? Like, just think about just think about the words you're saying before you say them.
This goes back to the conversation we were talking about earlier about being intersex.
But we're not talking about intersex. We're talking about people who were born as a male and they try to transition. The whole fact that they're trying to transition into a female in the first place shows that they aren't actually that, or else there would be no need to transition, right? So you say, okay, I feel like a woman. What is that? What does that feel like?
Yeah, how does that?
And how do you know?
I'm not saying I feel like a woman. I am a woman.
So then why did you transition? Why can't you just present as a man but be a woman?
I transitioned so I could be who I was. I did not feel like I was the person that I identified with when I was born. So I took the steps to align my outside body with how I feel on the inside. What makes you stand up every day and make you identify as a woman? Let me challenge you on that.
I am a woman, and I don't like being called a cis woman because I'm not a cis woman. I'm a woman. I'm not a birthing person. I'm a mother.
So get mad at the terminology, not at trans people.
It's your new terminology.
But this is what I notice a lot of cis women do. The terminology has been around for so long. Cis is a prefix. Cis means same. Instead of getting mad at trans and non-binary people for using updated terminology, get mad at Webster. You're not going along with the times and being educated on the different pronouns and the different identities.
Get mad at Webster.
You have to admit, some of the pronouns are kind of ridiculous. I mean, to be, with all due respect, I'm sure you have to agree some of the pronouns
I don't think
use.
they're ridiculous. I think they're very expansive. Trans and non-binary people just want you to respect their chosen pronoun. We are not trying to force pronouns on you. Just understand that the terminology is going to continue to grow. If you're willing to educate yourself and understand, then you've got it.
The ability to give birth is a woman's greatest strength.
What kind of question is this? What is oh my, that's a weird, no, I mean, like, it's hard to say that about any individual. We're talking as a group here. I would say no. I would say like education and like intelligence, like, is generally, I would say, like, human strength all around. What a weird question. What a weird question.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
Not to mention, we could get, like, I assume, like, anybody who would have stepped forward would have had to, like, start talking about, like, women who, like, got uterine cancer and, like, can't give birth, stuff like that, and then it would run into a lot of problems immediately.
I'm not able to have children, so I'm still strong.
There we are.
I'm funny.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so if I were a white person and I said blackness is about integrity and courage and kind of the same thing that you used to define womanhood, and then I said I want to transition into a black person and I'm white, and I'm redefining what blackness is to fit what I view it as, right? There's no objective reality of what blackness is. Would you consider that appropriation, or do you think that's something I should be allowed to do?
I consider that dodging, and I consider that comparing apples to oranges, because race and gender identity are two separate different things.
Okay, it's not dodging. She asked a question. You could say it's comparing apples to oranges, but it's not dodging.
Because when we look at race, we have to look at many, many different structures of what whiteness and white supremacy looks like and how white supremacy can be manipulated into other things. And what happens is the closer you are in proximity to whiteness, you're able to weaponize it against other people. It reminds me a lot of Rachel Dolezal, who, you know, masqueraded as a Black woman. It really did open up many more doors of conversations around it, but it's still wrong. It's still not fair because she will still ultimately have a privilege that I, as a Black trans woman, would not begin to have.
What's interesting is that we're talking about race and gender, or as we probably like to call it on our side, sex. Race actually has a more understandable structure for people being transracial. Race does actually exist on a spectrum. I'm biracial. Many perceive me to be Black, even though I am also half white and half Black. We label people like President Obama as a Black president, even though he is as well. Race has never had binary markers. It does exist on a spectrum. Gender, however, does have binary markers. As much as we try, as much as we change the way that we self-present, chromosomes are not going to change, and that's just a reality.
All right, I'm going to bring up a little point here because you talked about the binary side of gender. Well, I was born a little of both. I believe I've never had my chromosomes checked, but since I fathered 2 children, I'm assuming I have the correct male chromosomes. So I was intersexed, and there's a lot of reasons that happens, none of which are well studied or understood, but a friend of mine in the pediatric trauma world says about 1 in 150 kids come out with some degree of ambiguity in their gender. For me, that appeared as always feeling out of place. And for the first week of my life, I was in the surgical wards at, Naval Hospital in San Diego, getting pieces of me cut off. So, and then they gave me testosterone for the first 11 years of my life. I wish the world were truly sexually binary. It would make it so much easier. But there is a little bit of a smear. And, as a trans person, I'm a very conservative trans person. I don't see the huge gender spectrum that a lot of people in the trans community do. Do I feel better having transitioned? Yes, absolutely. I used to live in a little shell, very large shell, but, now I'm, much more open about who I am. Is that the only thing that generally defines a woman? No, I don't think that is the only thing that generally defines a woman.
Right. I think there are a lot of women who may be on our side of the argument who will try to maybe invalidate your experiences by saying you can't give birth or you can't have a period. And while those things may be true, I'm sure there's a lot of other different struggles that you all are going through. And I would truly believe that you probably are highly discriminated against in our society, and it is hard to be you. It is hard to go through the things that you go through and have to deal with some of the responses that you get from people.
Man, I wonder what type of rhetoric and dialogue in politics reinforces that discrimination. I wonder. I guess we'll just never know.
And, it's not a struggle that I would wish on myself at all.
Not a struggle I wish on my worst enemy.
Trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports.
Oh, God.
Damn,
one person?
Every right.
Oh, my God. Ugh. Oh, my God. Okay, so I can give you guys my take on it. My general... Oh, God, this is a hard opinion to share because I don't know how specific I have to get with it, but I'll try to be as specific as possible. When it comes to grade school, I believe trans women should be able to basically participate in any number of sports that they want to, after a shortened amount of I guess like transitionary period. But generally, I'm against most restrictions on like grade school sports, period, because I want as many people to participate in extracurricular activities at school as physically possible, because this is a great opportunity for kids to socialize. It's good for them to be physically active. It's good for them to, develop the skills that they will develop in extracurricular activities. And it's important for them to be social. So I really don't like the idea of restricting trans people who have a much higher rate of suicidality from another avenue to make friends, socialize, and be in shape. I would really hate to do that. Definitely, since their exclusion by law in sports in grade school would mean that, well, I mean, they're getting pretty much singled out. You know, they are getting singled. They are quite literally getting singled out. Past that, I think it's up to scientists to determine the specifics. Because I don't believe that if I was to say tomorrow, or let's say right now, I was like, you know what, I've just discovered that I am trans, and I've really figured it out. And I'm like, also, I've also rediscovered my love for boxing. I don't believe that I should be in the same ring as Pixie or Not So Erudite. I do think that there has to be some period of physical transition if you've developed these muscles and bone structure and stuff like that. I do believe that, by the way, I would dominate Not So Erudite in a boxing match. I just want everyone to know that I would totally win in a boxing match. And I'm challenging Not So Erudite to a boxing match so she can disprove me. Just wanted to say that. I want to show everybody how brave I am by boxing Not So Erudite. Where was I? But yeah, you get what I'm saying. Like, I believe it should generally be up to doctors to determine this type of stuff. I don't call myself an expert in this type of stuff, so I don't really want to determine that. I would rather, I do think fairness when it comes to these levels of sports does matter. There is a question though, and this is a question that has raked my head that I think about a lot. A lot of women and men are just born with natural physical advantages. Should those people have restrictions placed upon them because they were born with natural physical advantages? Of course not. Is there an argument to be made that being trans, being a trans woman is just a natural physical advantage in all of these sports? It's something to think about. It's something to think about. It is something that's racked my head a bit, you know? It makes me think.
To compete in women's sports. When trans women are on hormones, the hormones break their body down. Having gender affirming surgery breaks down the body. And so I think we really need to be educated before we jump to a conclusion that trans women are stronger than cis women in sports. Hi, everybody.
I find it interesting that you assume the people who disagree with you are uneducated, and I will speak out against that. I think the research shows that trans women do happen to have a biological advantage against biological women. Even though you are taking hormones, and that does start to change your body and level things out, we're talking about primarily people who have transitioned post-puberty, which means they do have male bone density, male wingspan, male hand size, feet size, lung capacity. All of these things are going against women, biological women, when trans women start to enter their spaces, their sports, and compete against them. And this is really concerning for me.
I think for me, it's not a question of whether or not trans women can compete in sports. It's a question of how can we change the institution of sports in this country to make it equitable and to create more opportunity for cis women, for trans women. And like, that's kind of like why I wanted to actually ask you all, like, what has your relationship to sports been?
I don't think you have to have a direct relationship to sports to realize that women are being affected by this issue, and I do reject the idea of equity. There is no way to come about an equality of outcome, which is what equity is saying. There's a reason that women's sports are less funded and less watched than men's sports. It's because men seem to excel athletically, and they seem to press the bounds of athleticism way farther than women do. We now exist on a slippery slope. If it's female sports, is it then female?
Wait. When you think about it, if that's the case, okay, this is the best case I'll ever make. Unironically, I think the only time people care about women's sports is when trans people get brought up. Therefore, the best boom for women's sports has been trans women. And so if we want people to give all these women jobs by actually watching them fight and do shit, and watching like a cis woman get their ass beat by a fucking trans woman in a boxing match, it is by allowing trans women into women's sports. This is how we will allow women's sports to become bigger and brighter than it's ever been, is by introducing more trans people, because then Tucker Carlson will talk about it every night, and the natural athleticism of the trans woman will make it more interesting to watch. Think about it. This is brilliant. Not to mention, we could one day have a multi-gender boxing champion, like a champion who like won a male, like won a became heavyweight champion in a men's division, and then like found out they were transition, and then boom, got it in the women's division too. That'd be super interesting. That would sell tickets. Look at this capitalism moment.
Rooms? Is it then female prisons, which we're now seeing becoming an issue here in California, where biological male inmates are being put in female facilities because they identify as women? We have to discuss as a society how much we give into the feelings of wanting everybody to be accepted, and how much we are willing to do that at the expense of biological women.
I use myself as an example. This is about how big I was in junior high school and early high school. I used to be able to walk up to a V8 engine block, pick it up off the floor, and set it on a table. And if I was in powerlifting or weightlifting, that amount of, that advantage was just unbelievable. I've been on hormones for 15 years. Did it weaken me? Absolutely. Did my bone density really hasn't changed, my muscular hasn't changed. And this is not a binary question. There's a lot of nuances involved.
I just want to ask a question. For what you were saying, can you throw out some statistics?
I don't think you need to have so there's an abundance of research. There's even trans activists who agree with exactly what I'm saying. And your hormones can change, right? And even she just spoke to the fact that her bone density did not change in going on hormones and changing these things. And we can see it in sports as we're watching them. Leah Thomas is a great example.
So if you can't throw out the statistics, we're not doing enough of the work. And let's also be clear, there are some cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone as well. And so we really have to unpack it from all different sides here.
Can you produce statistics about the bone density of biological men and how it changes upon being on hormones, and whether or not it levels out to biological women?
I actually cannot, because when I would think of those statistics, I would think it was BS, to be quite honest with you, because the reality of it is we could talk about statistics and...
Can I be honest? Like, it is the thing is, what we're talking about here also is like trans women who have grown into adults, right? Then once they become adults, they have transitioned. At that point, you are gonna this isn't gonna be true for everybody, but you're gonna have certain like advantages over other people in women's sports. It's just gonna be the case. I think a lot of people want to live in a world where like the existence of trans people and trans women is going to just basically, they're going to line up with a biological woman 1-to-1 on every metric, you know? And it this is not just not possible. It's just not possible because of the different developments that the body goes through at a young age. Maybe it will be with the future and technology, but it isn't now. And so now that we live in that reality, it's kind of hard for us to accept that, man, it really fucking sucks. The idea that somebody would transition and like, you know, they'd want to participate in sports, but then this question comes up about fairness. But I also think it is a legitimate question to ask. I do. Definitely when I think about the sports that I enjoy, like combat sports. That doesn't mean that it's impossible, but it is a very difficult question, and I don't think it's an easy answer. I don't think the answer is as easy as saying, like, oh, basically, like, at any point in transition, you can join sports and it's perfectly fine and fair and nobody has any problems. But I also don't think you can say that, hey, all trans women should be, like, banned from sports because it will always be unfair in every circumstance. I think a lot of times it's going to unironically be a case-by-case basis, and there's not going to be a system in place to really deal with this for at least the immediate future. I've seen trans women participate in combat sports, and I thought it was completely fair. And because I looked at like how their body was formed the type of treatments they went through, and the other participant being completely fine and fighting them. And I was like, yeah, I think this is perfectly fine for them to have a fight. But I don't think that's going to be the case in every single instance. This is really probably going to be a case-by-case basis here. I don't think this has an easy answer whatsoever. And I think we want it to have an easy answer because it would be more equal if it did. But sadly, that just isn't the world we live in.
In the research all day long, but it's about experience. We're going to be looking more at the experience because, again, when we look at cisgender women who produce high levels of testosterone and who have been kicked out of sports and been disqualified from teams based on something that they biologically cannot control, then what are we really talking about here?
Well, we're talking about, data and that is overwhelming, and we're talking about what is also we're capable of seeing with our human eyes. I think it's very clear that if you compare maybe you to the rest of us.
Well, let me be clear. I don't think it's the government's job to jump in and ban trans women from sports. I feel like this would be up to every individual institution to try to like guide regulation here. At least for like I don't understand. Maybe somebody can change my mind on this. But like I don't understand why the government would need to be the rule maker here. Like if it's a government-based sports institution, then at least I understand to some degree. But the idea that like women are not allowed to participate, trans women are not allowed to participate in professional sports, like why is that the government's job to tell professional sports companies how to like run their company when it comes to allowing these people to participate? I mean, I understand that there's regulations on sports, but why this specific regulation? Why is that the government's role?
There is going to be a strength difference. There's going to be a bone density difference.
But you're just saying that you don't know until we physically do something, and just perceiving and assuming just because I look a certain way, that's not fair. Me and her we could look completely different or whatever, but she may be stronger than me.
I agree, but
she have much more agility and vitality than I do. We don't know that until you actually do it.
I'm saying it has been studied, it's been done.
And it's been done. We've seen it numerous times, time again.
But we're only going on assumption at this point. Because again,
it's not assumption when we see it. Maybe it's the news cycle that I watch, but I see it a lot. I see it quite often where they're showing trans women beating. I mean, I'm by far.
And you don't see women dominating in the men's sports, right? You don't see trans men going into men's sport and just completely dominating and wiping the field with them. This is what happens when you, in my opinion, twist God's design and when you go against God's design.
I do think that a lot of this is the news cycle they launch. If I'm being honest, trans women aren't just like wiping the field with all the cisgender women, because there's just not those many transgender people in sports. Maybe if that number continues to increase, we're gonna see that more and more, but that's not like really happening at high rates. It's also why it's not really an issue that I care about particularly that much.
And you create these problems that you wouldn't have if you weren't going against what God intended.
I'm going to take her side a little bit on that. Let me say one more thing, and I'm supporting you on this one. There's a great deal of women that, and actually there was a lady in the last Olympics that they actually disqualified until she went on androgen blockers to knock her testosterone down to a female level. Like I said, this is not a binary yes or no question. And the whole idea of messing with what God puts up, God put me up, okay, if you want to take that. And I had this conversation with a very religious man in San Diego, and he was like, oh, I don't quite know how to deal with that.
And God made you that way, but he didn't make a lot of the people transition.
I understand.
No, but God also understands.
Why did God make him intersex? And then why did God, after making him intersex, immediately have doctors chop off a piece of his body? Okay, it's just like I don't feel like that's a satisfactory answer to what he was proposing. I think that woman like put forward a really good argument, and I feel like it was like honestly not a good response.
My transition. God, first of all, knew what I was going to be in my life. God already knew I was going to be trans when God put me here. So I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair when people dip and dab. Your relationship with God is personal.
Yes.
It's sacred.
Let's
and I don't
think
it's fair when other people dip and dab in other people's relationship with God when they don't understand what they go through. God still blesses me as a trans woman. God blesses you as a cisgender woman. God is embodied in me as a trans person. I don't think it's fair, again, when we judge people's personal relationship with God. Gender identity, sexual orientation, none of that matters to a God that loves all.
Gender dysphoria is real.
I mean, this is not, I mean, like, everybody has to sit there. Like, this is just, it's like scientifically proven real. It's like not even like a question.
I think it is obviously real because many people experience it, but like any kind of dysphoria, whether it's someone who thinks they're overweight or anything, I think it should be treated as not reality. Like if I thought I was obese, I wouldn't want to go to a affirming therapist to tell me, yes, you are obese and you should, you know, get skinnier.
Well, I had the opportunity of working on the DSM-4, I think it was, when we actually declassified transgender dysphoria from a mental illness to a condition. You know, I had been, at that point in time, I'd been cross-dressing for 50 years. And, you know, because that dysphoria was there and every single thing I did to try to drive it away didn't work. I spent millions of dollars trying to be the coolest dude in the world. You know, I bought airplanes, I bought everything that I could to just show the world how masculine I was. It didn't work. It didn't go away. And I did therapy. I purposely went to a therapist that was anti-gender affirming. And literally he said, you need to do this. You know, and because it was so deep-seated. Spent 6 weeks.
It's a hell of a testimony. Going to a transphobic doctor and they're like, okay, I might be transphobic, but you're one of the real ones. I can't explain this. You have a dedication to Fallout New Vegas that it can only be seen in a trans woman.
Is Gina with my son, and at the end of that period of time, he asked two very fundamental questions. The most important one was, it's got to be truly exhausting for you to lead two lives. And I was kind of like, that kind of shook me to the core that my 22-year-old son saw that better than I did. So shortly thereafter, I announced to my family that I was going to transition. My wife and I separated because of it. The kids were not necessarily shocked, but you know, understood and have supported me quite well. And my wife has actually become a very good, you know, very warm, supporting person for me.
Gender dysphoria almost made me kill myself. And coming from Mississippi, at the time, there wasn't a lot of access to gender-affirming resources, like hormones, if I wanted surgery, whatever the case may be. And a lot of us trans folks who don't have access like that, a lot of us have to do sex work to be able to afford some of these things as well. Me coming up at the age of 20, and I knew I had a serious gender dysphoria, I did things to my body that I should have went to a hospital to do. That is something that's very, very hard for people to understand. A lot of us commit suicide because of gender dysphoria, and so it hits our community a lot harder.
I do think gender dysphoria is very much real. I think the issue that's happened, especially in the space of science and research, is that we've looked at gender dysphoria and said the only source of care that we can go through is blind gender affirmation care. And a lot of the research shows that this is not the route to go into. In other countries that have decided to do nonpartisan
University of Washington peer-reviewed study, receipt of gender-affirming interventions, specifically PBs or GAHs, was associated with a 60% lower odd of moderate to severe depressive symptoms and 73% lower odds of self-harm or suicidal thoughts during the first year of multidisciplinary gender care. Damn.
Research. Sweden, Finland have decided that yes, gender affirmation care should be an option, but it really should be the last resort when it comes to treating people who appear at clinics with gender dysphoria. You know, a lot of conservatives will deny and say, well, gender affirmation care does not make them happier. And in many cases, that is true. But there are the cases like yourselves where the gender affirmation care does make them happier. You
know, I know a lot of people that have transitioned, have untransitioned. I've talked with a gentleman at a religious right convention one day, and he was sitting there screaming how Jesus got him out of his gender transition. And honestly, that was the saddest man I've ever talked to in my life. When I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, you know, here, I don't agree with what you say, but I 100% support your right to say that. And he just literally broke down crying on the steps of the Supreme Court.
If I could interject really quickly, I do.
No, absolutely not.
I feel as though the medical profession is actually inching towards a space that is going to become unsafe for people who try to express their gender dysphoria, because now we have young children coming into clinics expressing this, who by and large, statistically, about 60 to 70% grow out of that dysphoria. But because it's become a political issue, where many activists have come in and say, no, you blindly affirm, you affirm to the furthest extent that you can, rather than going through a more comprehensive process with these children, we have what I think is a medical tragedy happening against young people in this country.
I have been sexually harassed.
Yeah, I think in our society, it's so sexualized.
That's the real way to tell the women from the men. Damn.
Everyone and everything, and I think we owe a lot of that to pornography and just media, and I think the kind of acceptance that I do see more so in the LGBT community of, like, you know, sex is great and let, like, everyone talk about it and there's no shame and everyone's just blurting out, you know, the fact that we're perpetuating a culture that's, frankly, in my opinion, disgusting.
So are you talking specifically about LGBT people?
I'm talking more so just about this sexual revolution, that the more sexual you are, the more partners you have, the more open you are about your sex life and everything, the more, like, liberated you are. What is consent? Like, people are coming out of the woodwork saying, you know, I was violated, this happened to me, but they, like, drove home with that person. And I'm not blaming them, but I am saying those lines are being blurred because of our just flagrant disregard for any kind of, like, actual relationship prior to the sexual encounter. And I think a lot of people are being exploited left and right.
True sex positivity has been powerful. It has helped us to grow and learn about our bodies in so many ways and learn safe sex practices in so many ways. What I would blame for rape culture or for a lack of good boundaries or that kind of thing is we live in a capitalist system that has taken things like sex positivity and mangled it and repackaged it and made it a whole other thing than what it actually is.
I was sexually harassed for 5 years by a woman. That does happen because I'm pretty sure it's going to be we're men this, men that. It's hard coming from a man, but to me it was harder coming from a woman because it wasn't expected. Like, I understand you're going to probably touch on that about how men are more on the predatory side or the more harassing side sometimes. But I just want to let you know that it does happen with women as well.
All through my life, you know, world's biggest kid in junior high school, I basically was harassed continuously for being gender non-conforming. Back then, you know, everybody in junior high school took showers together. I basically had a permanent welt on my bottom from people snapping towels at me because, you know, I wasn't as well endowed as I probably should be. I had, you know, pretty good sized boy boobs and basically was just unhappy being in sports. But, you know, it happens everywhere. I have been sexually assaulted, and it didn't work out well for any of them. It's real. Let me just put it that way. It's absolutely real.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to find a person who hasn't been sexually harassed in some way, shape, or form, whether you are male or female. I think it's an experience that we all share because we are in somewhat of a hyper-sexualized society, and people love to make those comments public. I am a podcaster and I do social media for a living, so as you can imagine, the onslaught of sexual harassment is quite vast.
From a very young age, I've had this recurring nightmare of something happening to me, trying to warn people, and no one believes me. When you're not believed that you're a desirable person, and I really don't think rape has anything to do with desire, but when you're not believed in that way, when trans women are experiencing trans misogyny, we're the ones who are least believed when we are sexually assaulted. And it just feels so disempowering and so terrifying when you know that you are someone who is seen as hypersexual, as inherently sexual, as inherently predatory, and yet at the same time you're seen as someone who can be isolated and sexually assaulted and not believed.
I don't think there's anything inherently predatory about trans people. And I think oftentimes when we're talking from a conservative perspective, it gets misconstrued as viewing you as a threat. And I hope that that never comes off. And I think that allegations of sexual assault, regardless of who they're coming from, should be taken seriously.
Okay. They're wrapped up.
I think we agreed on something.
We found common ground.
There we go. Look, their common ground is sexual harassment is bad. Wow, look at that. Look at the common Jubilee ground. They really built some real bridges today in the let's not sexually harass people front. Very, very, very bold moves.